Awesome. Okay, so we're here with Dr. Robert Kerr, who wrote a chapter in the history of American college football. So his chapter was called A Last Stand for a Less Commercialized Game. And so our first question is if you could just take a couple minutes to give us a brief summary about your chapter and what it covers for those that haven't had the chance to read it.
Yes. This chapter gave me an opportunity to really kind of do a couple of things that I have a lot of interest in. And one was I do a lot of research involving the First Amendment, but I have this large secondary research interest in sports media, and really sports media history mostly is what I've done. And then I have my work in that area has long led me to kind of focus on the way people in earlier times often thought very differently about things like football than we do now. And most people today can't really, football has become so normalized, college football for sure, but also, professional football, and really high school football is even really big now. I mean, we get all these high school games on television here, and not just from Oklahoma. Um, so when I saw the proposal for this book, and I pitched my idea, I was glad they liked it, because I really I hadn't got to spend a lot of time with the Board of Regents case. Of course, if you've been around University of Oklahoma and you have interest in sports, there was a big Supreme Court case back in the 80s, and I knew basically what happened, but I hadn't really, focused on it closely. And I really see that as, you look for markers in history as a watershed place where society had kind of been wrestling, arguing, debating whether football was, to put it real simply, good or bad, and, from the chapter that there were quite a number of years when some influential voices argued that it was not a good thing, all in all, that it was, physically dangerous. A lot of people were dying and getting maimed. And then also the impact on society, especially a lot of people in churches were very powerful, and a lot of universities, were had been founded by churches. So it was they had a big influence on the sport, and they really felt it was generating too much attention on things that people shouldn't be, too much debauchery and just general frivolousness, and sometimes violence and drunkenness, all these things that the churches felt very strongly about. And I'm old enough to remember when those kind of voices from the churches really had a lot more sway in the course of public decision making. So they came pretty close, from the chapter to football was almost banned, and just decided it was just too dangerous. And then gradually they got past that. Creating the NCAA was a big reason they got through that, which is another one of my interests in this chapter, is that the NCAA is kind of often viewed today as this, just sort of this alien, entity that comes in and tells universities and athletic programs what to do. When really the NCAA saved college football back in the early part of the 20th century. So all those things, this gave me a chance to look at this court case in the 1980s when I see, at least in the courts. And I would, I think more broadly, society was kind of, those arguments had collided, and we were going to decide which way are we going to go here. Are we going to go, just totally take off all the limitations and let this become as commercialized as it can be, or are we going to try to pull it back some by restricting television, which today that sounds like a insane thing. How could you have less football on television? That's just, most people just assume, even if they don't like football, they just assume that's just a given. You're going to have lots of football on college. Lots of football on television. And really, it could have gone the other way. As you know, there were two justices who felt very strongly and tried to make the case for going the other way. And one of them, this was what was beautiful about this case and this chapter, is that one of them just happened to be unquestionably the best football player ever to serve on the U.S. Supreme Court, and Byron White. And so for him to take the position that maybe we should try to decommercialize the direction we're going is really interesting. And then, of course, the other seven, by and large, Justice Blackmun wrote it. He's an interesting justice too, and he was an expert in antitrust law, and he saw this as just an antitrust case. It didn't matter that it involved college football. It could have involved widgets, or anything, and he probably would have looked at it the same way. It sounds like. So anyway, that's probably the basic elements that made me want to write this chapter.
Fantastic. Thanks for elaborating it. It definitely seems like a case that has a lot of significance today, particularly with Sean Alston and his Supreme Court case, working its way through. I'm pretty sure like the Supreme Court is hearing arguments on it like over this week. I want to say, how timely for the interview. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with the case, but I wanted to, I was kind of curious, the subheading of the chapter talked about this being the last stand of the commercialization of the college game. Right. If that was the last stand, what will Sean Alston's case and subsequent ruling be in your eyes?
Well, just broadly speaking, it's dangerous to ever predict what the Supreme Court will do, but I would say it's very likely he's going to prevail. And I may be somewhat biased, but I think if Board of Regents had gone the other way, his prospects would be much tougher. And I really see that as once Board of Regents went that way, and the court made such a strong statement that the NCAA could be restricted in some pretty significant ways, then more and more people began to push against that. And sports has just evolved in so many directions. And, whenever you're involved as a scholar with a certain subject, you kind of see the world through that lens. But I see so many of the changes in sports the past 40 years or so as, could be a lot different if the court had said, the court often looks for categories. And if they had put college sports in a category that was different from other antitrust subjects, then later courts would have also thought about that. Well, okay, this is a special category. This isn't just like any other business. Whereas in this case, I think you're right, it's this week, they're going to have the oral arguments. The court isn't going to be thinking about they're going to be looking at, would this be fair in another business setting? And they seem to be going that way with the trademark case. The was it O'Bannon, I guess, won the trademark or the image case. That was a big thing for athletes. And it seems that college athletes are very interested in this, and they've gotten a lot more savvy and sophisticated about making their case and getting the right lawyers involved, and it seems like by and large, popular media seem to be on the side of the athletes, which that never hurts, popular sentiment. I can remember when I was younger, sentiment kind of seemed to run the other way. People were kind of offended at the ideas that athletes might think they should be a profit or be compensated more than just a scholarship. And and some people still say those kind of things, but it doesn't seem like you hear that as much as you once did. Now people seem to be more comfortable with the idea of even college athletes. And I have to wonder if this won't reach high school sports. Because as I was saying, when I watch a lot of high school, when I see them on television, it's presented at the kind of level with the kind of production and, all the excitement that college football used to have 30, 40 years ago, and that, or even more recently. And now the high schools are really in on that. You see high schools from all over the country in these big high stakes games. So I have to feel all this is going to move into that too. So, and I think you're right. I think I saw in one of the stories, the oral arguments may be today. They may be happening right now, which is really kind of, poetic timing for us to be talking about this.
It certainly is going to be interesting. I had just gotten an alert on my phone from The Athletic, and then they were reporting about it. And so I was reading at what some of the Supreme Court justices had said and some of the
really?
arguments. Yes. Yeah. And it was quite like Justice Kavanaugh. He said something to the effect, he basically said, the whole idea of amateurism it just isn't working for y'all in this case. And he didn't see how it was going to pan out. They were alluding to a more tough stance against the NCAA. So I think you're right. I hadn't even thought about the high school aspect of this, and potentially, how that the money that has been invested in the media trickles down throughout, the sports complex of the United States. It's quite crazy.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Went to a high school football game back in my hometown this past season, and just like the jumbotron and the drone, and they've really, really amped it up. So you can see how the community is coming.
Yes.
Behind.
Where is that?
I am from Anderson, South Carolina, so TL Hannah. Some people know it from the movie Radio, but
okay, I don't know that, but I know about where it is, I think.
Yeah, it's not too far from Clemson too. So I think the area kind of hyped up about football right now in general.
Yeah. Well, that's so true. Oklahoma is pretty big in high school football, but especially in Texas, there are a huge number of high schools that have stadiums that most colleges would have been envious of just a few years ago, except colleges have also really upgraded their stadium. My university has had at least 2 total overhauls of the stadium just since 20 years that I've been on the faculty. So, and it looks totally different than it did when I was doing my master's at OU in the 90s. So they call it the arms race. Every university has to have really cutting edge, luxurious facilities, or you're not going to get the top athletes. And I was just going to say, usually, some people might say, "Oh no, this won't trickle down to high schools," but because the courts have historically been a little more protective of K through 12 students than college. They treat college students more as adults, but there will be some really good high school players who, when they're seniors for sure, but maybe even sophomores and juniors, and they would be able to market themselves. And for some sports governing body to say, well, no, we're not going to let you make money. I really wonder if the courts are going to say we agree, or be sympathetic to the market value that a lot of these high school athletes are going to have. So many, it's not a huge number, but there are so many more than when I was young who go straight from high school, either straight to the pros, or 1 year of college and then the pros. So it's not a sharp, bright line between high school and college on this question, I don't think.